I mean, that's what got me into chiropractic. I was in so much pain, and I went to a chiropractor after going to the medical doctor and taking my blood pressure, my urine, my blood sample, basically telling me I was perfectly healthy and that my pain was all in my head. And I'm like, my pain isn't up here. My pain is right here, and right here, and I didn't used to have that. There must be a reason for it, but they had no clue. And a friend of mine told me about her chiropractor, and she said, you should go see him. And I said, okay. And back then, I mean, this was a long time ago. This is in 1981. And I had no idea what a chiropractor was. But if she told me he might be able to help me, I was like desperate at that point because I was in so much pain. And so I went to see him, and within 2 weeks, I was completely pain free. He didn't do any emotional work, no chemical work. He only adjusted me, and it changed my life.
Hey all, Nathan Riley here, host of the Holistic OBGYN podcast. And when people hear the word holistic, what they usually think is natural remedies. What's a holistic way to treat GBS or whatever? And as you probably know, I'm not a typical allopathic doctor. Yes, I have 2 board specialties that are up to date. I'm well recognized in the allopathic communities as a real deal doctor, but I've had to broaden my toolkit to include a variety of functional medicine and energetic medicines that really, really help the clients that seek out my care. And a lot of people come to me and they're on like 50 supplements, right? And they're sleeping well, and they're exercising, and they're eating, whole foods, organic foods, and they're still not really meeting their goals. Well, what if there's a story you've been telling yourself since you were a little girl or a little boy that you've held on to so dearly, like so tightly, that no matter what external inputs you put in, your body is going to continue operating the way that it has been imprinted and pre-programmed to operate. So this, of course, can come from things like concussions or injuries or other traumatic experiences. But it could also be, even in the way that we love. So I'll give you an example. If you're a little kid and your mother, who you loved so, so deeply, showed love to you and maybe your father, maybe your siblings, by criticizing you over and over and over so that you could be an A+ student and perfect in every way. If that was the case, perhaps you were imprinted with this notion that loving somebody was synonymous with criticizing somebody. And then in your personal relationships, your intimate relationships, whether it's with your boyfriend or ex-boyfriend or your spouse, or maybe it's your second marriage, whatever, if you can look back into those relationships and you can say, I'm always really, really critical of the people that I'm close to. That doesn't mean you're a bad person. There's no shame here. But if you were to recognize that and say, my love blueprint clarified that I equated from a very, very early age, somewhere deep in my unconscious or subconscious, that love equates to being critical. In other words, to love a person well, you need to be very, very critical of them. That's obviously going to have a degradative kind of force, a detrimental impact on your intimate relationships, assuming that the other person may have a different love blueprint. Maybe for them, to love somebody is the opposite of being critical of them. It's accepting them for all of their idiosyncrasies and flaws. Well, once you've identified that, what do you do now? In this sort of self-realization, this sort of new awakened conscious community out there talks about, looking at the shadow and working on your shadow. But your nervous system is operating sort of on its own. And that can lead us to, quandaries around how we eat, how we take care of ourselves, how we love one another. Another example might be, if you don't actually believe that you're going to, that you want to lose weight, or you don't actually believe that you want to do X, Y, or Z, there's a way of testing that through something called kinesiology. And a really basic example is if you were to hold your left arm out in front of you, or right arm, it doesn't really matter, right? Make your shoulder real strong and push down. Okay, it's strong, right? You can resist. But then if you were to say something that is obviously false, like I'm a man, if I were to say I am a woman and then retest that, my muscles will go a little bit weaker, sometimes imperceptibly. But when you get good at practicing this, you can start to figure out that, oh, my nervous system, there's an incongruency there. My nervous system is going weak because I said something that is not true. So you could do this for, I am happy with being successful. I am happy with making money. I am happy in my marriage. Love is not synonymous with criticism. You can make any statement you want. And when you muscle test, and there's a variety of different ways to do this, you will find that an incongruent statement, meaning I love my children, if you go weak, you actually deep down don't believe that. Now, again, this is not about shame. This is probably something you were sort of pre-programmed with at a young age. And all of this stuff around consciousness and everything doesn't give us a lot of tools for how to rectify these incongruencies. Meaning that if we want to achieve something and we don't actually believe that we can or will do it, then we won't. And you can clarify that with muscle testing, like I just demonstrated. But my guest today also gives you a way of rectifying it. And that's why I'm super excited to share with you Teshna Beaulieu. She is French-Canadian, and her name is very hard to pronounce if you don't speak French. I met her at a birth up in Albany area, New York, where the father of this baby that came out as a VBAC, beautiful home birth, he said, hey, I want you to meet my friend Teshna. This is Jason Picard. I don't think I have to beat around the bush. I think it actually comes up in the conversation. But he said, hey, I want you to go and meet with my friend Teshna. So I went in, and she's a chiropractor, has all the chiropractor stuff, but she was doing all kinds of interesting things. And she found all these incongruencies in statements that I was making. And then she used a variety of tapping along the meridians, which of course we've borrowed from Chinese medicine, and some red lights and all kinds of interesting things in order to rectify that, such that when I retested with those statements that were giving me muscle weakness, that they were strong now. And so this is a little part of why when you go to the chiropractor, sometimes the adjustment works for a moment and then it goes right back to dysfunction. Well, Teshna, being a chiropractor, noticed this, and she talks about this in the podcast. But then she wanted to, once she started noticing, maybe there's something actually in there, like a limiting belief that's limiting to how your body optimally wants to function. This is fascinating stuff. We're going very, very deep here, but quite a bit of why quite a bit of the experiences I have with women who are finding some sort of dysfunction after birth, it goes back to limiting beliefs around what motherhood is, for the fathers, around what fatherhood is. What does the family do to love one another? How do we show up in this way? And if we don't really, really believe it, we're just saying it and acting the way that we want without rectifying some of these incongruencies. You may find that no matter what you do, how many supplements you're taking, how hard you're working out, whatever, how many self-help books you read, that you still aren't able to fix whatever this underlying issue is. And so the good Dr. Teshna is here to talk about meridian tapping therapy and the meridian tapping technique and a variety of other sort of curiosities that she's explored over the years. You can train with her. We'll put all the information in the podcast description for you. I just want you to sit back and enjoy this one. But before I do, I want to remind everybody, if something in this conversation touches you in any way, please share with your friends and also leave us a podcast review. Believe it or not, the algorithm only really cares how many 5-star reviews you have on Apple Podcasts and Spotify and some of the other channels. We're also on YouTube. Go subscribe there. Share these episodes with your friends. I don't do the typical thing that OBGYNs do, right? Like the birth stuff is one thing. But if a lot of this other stuff in the physical, mental, or even spiritual space is kind of like a faulty foundation for all that physical stuff we're trying to do, it's just going to be dead in its tracks, which may make you feel like you've tried everything. But if you haven't gone down this path, you really haven't tried everything, and this may actually offer a solution to what ails you. We have two podcast sponsors that I'll very, very quickly tell you about, and then we'll get into my conversation. WeNatal has the best prenatal vitamin on the market. They make a his and her vitamin, and they make an omega DHA plus, which is a really, really nice fish oil. Beauty of WeNatal, it was made by two women who did struggle with fertility, pregnancy loss, and their own childbirth experiences. And they got together and decided, let's make a really, really good prenatal. And so they've included all of those things that you want to see in a prenatal. If you're taking something with folic acid, you've got to get that out of your diet. I don't care what anybody says. Methylfolate is the way to go. You can get that through beef liver, and you can get a lot of other nutrients through smoked oysters and fermented cod liver oil and eggs and bone broth. But if you're doing those things and you want an insurance policy, adding WeNatal's formula to your daily regimen way before you even get pregnant, ideally. But even if you're pregnant now or postpartum and you want a really, really high quality multivitamin for men or women, WeNatal's prenatal is the way to go. And as a podcast listener, if you go to wenatal.com/beloved, add a prenatal product to your cart and then add their omega DHA plus, they'll send that bottle of fish oil to you complimentary, just as a gift for being a listener of the podcast. Thank you, WeNatal, for supporting us. The other company is Immune Intel AHCC. That stands for active hexose correlated compound. This is a whole food supplement that is derived from the mycelia of shiitake mushrooms. And this extract has been clinically demonstrated to help clear persistent HPV in women who've been struggling with the abnormal PAP, HPV, biopsy continuum for well over 6 to 12 months. It's in phase 2 trials now. It's moving on to phase 3. I've been using it and finding anecdotally that this works almost every single time for people with an acute issue related to their cervical health. Take 2 to 4 capsules twice a day for at least 3 months, and you're probably going to end up with a repeat PAP that at least looks better, or a repeat colposcopic biopsy that at least looks better, if not improved. If not, at the worst case scenario, staying put. It's not progressing. So this may buy you time. And while you're taking that, you're also going to start working on your lifestyle modification for the long-term plan. But this, being a part of the acute phase treatment, is hands down the best thing I've found within the sort of supplemental space. So if you want to try this out, there's 2 ways you can do it. Go to themedicine.com, THEMEDICIN.com, use code beloved10, you'll save 10%. Get yourself a couple of bottles, enjoy the discount, save on shipping, get yourself some of that, and start taking it now while you're rectifying some of your lifestyle issues. The other way to score a bottle is to go to clearhpv.com and roll in Mimi Lindquist and I. We have this program called Clear and Free, your holistic solution to persistent HPV. Go and roll there. And we'll send you a complimentary bottle as well, because we know it works so well. But in that program, you can see on the website, we do quite a bit of coaching and counseling, and you get direct access to me for life as long as you're coping with some of these cervical cancer screening dilemmas. I love this brand. I really, really do. I don't have a lot of supplement companies that I love, but WeNatal and Immune Intel AHCC are 2 that I'm so grateful to have as podcast sponsors, because I'm very much aligned with them. So go and check these brands out. Let them know you're listening. And of course, tell your friends. The other online program I have is the Born Free Method. Everything that I do in the childbirth from preconception all the way through postpartum experience, also for dads, is highlighted in the Born Free Method. You get direct access to me, my phone number. You call me anytime something comes up. We work together from preconception, meaning your fertility challenges, all the way through however many babies you want. It's lifetime access. That's bornfreemethod.com. Every one of my Born Free Method new enrollees gets a 30-day supply of the his and her prenatals from WeNatal, who I've just described. So there's lots of ways to get in touch. If you want to find me elsewhere, go to belovedholistics.com for my practice website, and Nathan Riley OBGYN on Instagram. Dr. Teshna is a gift, and I am so excited to share this conversation with you. It's been a long time coming. I don't get easily blown away by people, but she has something special. So I hope you enjoy her special gifts in this very unique conversation with Dr. Teshna Beaulieu.
Beaulieu. I'm gonna practice Beaulieu. French Canadian. You've been doing healing work for over 40 years now, and just gosh, 3 months ago, you and I met at the hands of Jason Picard, one of your clients, one of our friends. And he said, hey, go and do a session with Dr. Teshna. This is going to be something new for you. And it was actually quite remarkable. I've been to a lot of chiropractors, but you've got some interesting techniques of your own. We're going to get into that. So the technique that you created, which of course anybody can train to do, especially if they're chiropractors or other healers, health professionals, whatever, the meridian therapy and tapping. This is a new technique that we're going to get into, and I experienced this for myself. But before we get too far ahead of ourselves, let's talk about kind of the foundations of why your work is so important, because it's very, very different from virtually anybody I've ever met. And it's actually very much in alignment with how I view things. You have a book called Fit for Love, and in it, you describe a person's unique love blueprint. So let's start there. Tell me, why should we care about this blueprint, and where did this blueprint even come from?
Yes. So basically, this love blueprint idea came up when I had been married for 20 years. And all of a sudden, after we finally had a child who was 2 years old at the time, my husband fell in love with someone else and left us. And I was like, what is going on here? Like, you would think after you've been with somebody for 18 years, it's a pretty safe bet to have a child that it's going to work out. But it didn't. And so I was like, what is going on? And then I realized that when I was 2 years old, my parents split up. And I thought, oh no, I wonder if I have a belief that love means once you have a child that's 2 years old, you're supposed to split up from your mate. And so because I had been doing muscle testing with a neuroemotional technique for many, many years, I knew how to muscle test myself for this. So I did. And sure enough, I believed that. I believed that as a parent, once you had a 2-year-old, you're supposed to split up. And I was like, oh my God, I just caused this subconsciously. My programming was so strong that I must have acted differently or talked differently. I did something somehow that pushed him away or make him feel like I wasn't giving him enough attention or whatever. So I had to
Which
find
was your way of loving. That was actually how you were loving, is we were supposed to separate. That's what love is.
Exactly. It's crazy. So it's like whatever your subconscious programming is what manifests. And so if you're unaware of what it says, then you're set up for what I call time bombs, right? So it's like, since that's happened to me, I was able to help many parents avoid the same pitfalls. Because when they come in with little kids, I say, okay, so did your parents stay together their whole life? And so, well, no, they broke up when I was 7. I'm like, okay, let's check this. And I check them, and every single time I find it.
Wow.
So, and then I fixed it. I cleared that programming and I changed it for, you can stay together as long as possible, with your kids. So anyway, it's pretty amazing. So anyway, but what happens for me is at that moment, when I discovered I had that particular belief, I thought, wow, what other beliefs do I have about love that I'm not even aware of that are causing these various things that I don't like in my life, right? So then I decided to take, in my book, I have the exercise described that I did for myself, which is take a piece of paper and then you write down on a piece of paper everything that you liked about your relationship and everything you didn't like about the relationship. So all the positive, all the negatives. So for me, a big one was that I was being criticized. And then I realized that my mother was very critical. So I was used to being criticized as a child. So of course I would look for a man who would criticize me, because that's what I believe love is. And furthermore, if he didn't criticize me, then I would do whatever it takes to be criticized.
This is going to be heavy.
So that I can make myself right. Do you see what I mean? And I can make myself feel like I'm loved. And so that was a big one. And another one was love and life mean being number 2. And I realized what happened, I was the firstborn, but when I was 1.5 years old, my sister was born and she was premature and she was sickly. So my mother's attention had to go to her. And so I felt from that moment on that I was number two, right? And it never changed because my sister always needed somehow more than I did with things. And so I was always feeling like I was number two. So I find myself a man who makes me feel like I'm number two. His work is more important. Other patients are more important because he's also a chiropractor, and etc. So I always felt like I was number two, right? And so on. Like there was all these different things that were annoying me consciously, but subconsciously it matched my blueprint perfect, right?
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
so that's what happened. And so I started to like test each one of these things that I didn't like and the things I liked, because there was a lot of good things too. Like, you know, my first husband, he's a great guy. I mean, I still love him in many ways, right? I wouldn't want to be with him anymore because he didn't change his blueprint, but
Yeah. Yeah.
but you know, it's not like I don't like him anymore, right? He's still a great guy. But the thing is, there was so many of those things there that were not fun for me. And so I cleared all of that. And that's what I call the love blueprint, is when you discover all the different things that you've been programmed with from conception until about 10 years old. That's what I find in my work. So when I go back and index for time, I find that it starts either in the womb or somewhere between birth and 10. It's very rarely beyond 10 that the love blueprint is going on. And it makes sense because from conception until about 7 and even a little bit later, like 10, is when our brain is developing and everything that happens is just going in without filters.
Right.
It's
right.
As a 3-year-old, you're thinking, oh, no, I don't want to believe that love means being criticized. You're being criticized. Therefore, you believe that's what love is. That's what love is, right? That's how it is. You're being programmed with whatever it is that's happened. So if you happen to be in a family where everybody's very kind and compassionate and understanding and respectful and asking you your opinion and all that, then that's how you develop and that's what you manifest in your life. But if you're born into a family that's abusive and critical and angry, and or they're like drug addicts or whatever, then you end up manifesting that in your life, whether you like it or not.
There's a couple of things that come to mind. First off, Rudolf Steiner's Waldorf education is based on 7-year cycles. And really, it's up until 9 or 10 that in that program, you're not really being pushed to do homework or to learn how to read or do whatever. You're really just being supported to create and explore and play. So there's a reason for that. And you of course, came across these numbers empirically, which I think is always beautiful to kind of validate what some of us have become like hard and fast rules, right? And how to raise kids or whatever. But even in some of the Eastern traditions, the first, second, and third chakras are all well established and aligned appropriately based on the environment in the first, that sort of pre-teen period. And then, of course, there's a myriad of other things, the nervous system developing and co-regulating for the early years of life. Like all of this is important from preconception through the early years of your childhood, based on how your parents kind of raised you and created an environment whereby you felt safe, you felt loved, not criticized, or whatever else. And if it did happen, then what you're able to do is pick those little bits and pieces that have become a part of your story, test for them, and then clear them. So before we go forward, I want to ask, when you're using these terms test and clear, so let's first talk about how you test for it, and then we'll get into neuro-emotional technique, the meridian tapping therapy, and some of the other things that I experienced in your office. So let's first start with, how on earth are you detecting this in the first place?
Okay, so the way I'm detecting that is using muscle testing. So when I'm in person with someone, I muscle test them, just like I was able to do with you because you were in person. And so basically, you can test any muscle in the body. And so, of course, being trained as an applied kinesiologist as a very early on, starting in 83, right? So I've been doing muscle testing since 83. I'm pretty good at it. So, but anyway, anyone can develop the skill. And I teach that in my trainings as well. So, but anyway, so you test the muscle first, and you make sure that you have a strong muscle to begin with. And then you have the person say a statement. Okay. And before that, I always check the people for switching. Because if they're switched, it's like a neurological disorganization that prevents your brain from being able to be congruent with what's congruent, and incongruent with what's incongruent. And those are the people who you tell them to go right and they go left. I tell them to go on their stomach on the table and they go on their back. So they're switched. It's neurologically, their brain isn't computing properly. So you have to clear that first. But once that's cleared, the body doesn't lie. So if you have the person say, I can let go of the belief that love means being criticized, and then you test the muscle. If they go weak on that, that means that they cannot let go of that.
Teshna, tell me exactly what it might look like. Maybe walk me through it. Like, how could I test myself right now, using fingers or arms? Just for people that are totally new to this, let's like go to preschool for a second.
Okay, so assuming that you're not switched, okay?
Yeah.
So let's have you roll your fingers like this, like intertwine, and then
if you guys want to see this, go to the YouTube video because she's showing it on camera. Okay, go ahead. Fingers are linked.
Fingers are linked like this. Just pull them apart like that, okay?
Okay, so I'm touching my index and thumb. Okay, index and thumb linked together on both hands.
Yeah, if you pull together apart, try to pull them apart. You can't. If you're strong. So now let's say you just say, as an example, say I am a man, and then test that.
I am a man.
And see if you're still strong on that. Okay. Now say I am a woman, and then test that and see if you go weak.
I am a woman. Oh, it's sliding. Yeah, it's definitely sliding. There is definitely a difference in strength. Yeah.
And the reason it does that is because just like when you're hooked up on a lie detector and they can pick up that your heart rate is going up and your blood pressure is going up and your sweat rate is going up and all this stuff. The other thing that happens that they don't measure is that the muscles become temporarily inhibited.
Because of the incongruence between what you're saying and what you know to be true.
Exactly.
Okay.
And that's on a subconscious level.
I see.
Because consciously, I believed that love meant being criticized. Because I don't like being criticized. But subconsciously, I did. So when you're doing the muscle testing, you're literally testing the subconscious congruency or incongruency with what you're saying. And that's what matters because your subconscious always wins.
Interesting. Okay.
Always wins.
So then as we're working through, go ahead. Yeah, I think we have a good foundation here now.
Yeah. It's like if you consciously want to do something, like let's say somebody wants to lose weight, but every time they try, they can't. They might even gain weight. It's because subconsciously there's a belief that says they don't want to lose weight. And that could be for all kinds of reasons, because they're afraid that they're going to be too sexy and men are going to be going after them, or it could be that, whatever. Like if they had a vanishing twin, that's one of the syndrome that I found is that they feel like if they start losing weight, they won't be able to stop it and they'll vanish. So they don't want to lose weight. And so, but the point is subconsciously, if you don't agree with what you just said, you're going to go weak. If you do agree with it, you're going to be strong. And it works with any muscles on the body. So if our listeners here are used to muscle testing themselves with an arm or with a finger or whatever it is, they could test themselves on those types of statements and see if they're congruent or not. And if they're not congruent, for example, like when I tested myself, I can let go of the belief that love and life means being criticized. And I went weak on that. I was like, oh, that makes sense, right? And then I used the technique to get rid of that, literally erase that program, and then make sure that the opposite program is in there. And then, and as you experienced, it's very fast. It doesn't have to take a long time. And most people have no idea how to clear their limiting beliefs or their stress or their fears and phobias and PTSD and addictions and all this stuff. And this technique, I figured out little protocols for each one of those things. And that's what I teach in
Yeah.
my training.
Yeah, I'm going to put for those who are watching on YouTube, we'll put a link to Dr. Teshna's website. But interestingly, it's actually quite easy. Dr. Teshna, exactly as it sounds, TESHNA.com. You can train with her, you can work with her, and I think you're going to want to do that after you hear more, because Dr. Teshna, when you and I were working in your clinic, it was, by the way, a very like unassuming sort of environment, and that's because you don't need all of these fancy bells and whistles and the lab and the special chambers and all the other things. You don't need all of that. And sometimes those things don't even work, in my experience, unless we clear some of these sort of precepts or percepts about our life before we get to work on the actual physical stuff. So like you said, I want to lose weight. I want to lose weight. Do you really want to lose weight? Because there might be some reason why your ego is actually holding on to that identity. And if you lose weight, you may be exposed to a whole bunch of other, stuff that you have to deal with. So maybe deep down, you really don't want to lose weight. And the only way to really, or one way to measure that is using your techniques. But then that's not even the end of it. You found a whole bunch of incongruencies for me, which were not as obvious as I'm a man or I'm a woman. They were related to how I was raised as a child. My father and my mother being very, very busy and not being valued if they weren't being critical of themselves and one another, or making enough money, or being busy all the time. And sure enough, that's exactly how I am. I am always busy. Presence and as my currency with my little girls is tricky. So you found the incongruencies, and then you did a series of other things in order to help clear that. So let's now walk through what you walked me through, because this is where I think the magic really is. This is okay, we found the problem, now let's fix it. Not too many people are able to offer that.
Exactly. And the fun thing is, I simplified the technique so much that I can teach it to anyone. So you don't have to be a doctor or a practitioner or anything. I've been teaching it to lay people, and it's transforming their lives. So it's really exciting for me. I even have like teenagers using it now, and like going to school, and if they feel nervous about something, this particular one, she goes to the bathroom and she does her technique and she comes back out like Superwoman, and then she can do whatever she needs to do for the rest of the day. So basically, once you test the muscle to find out if the person is congruent or not with a certain thing, and let's say, I'll take the example of, I can let go of the belief that love means being criticized. If you went weak on that, then I would have you hold a meridian point on the wrist and then at the same time hold your forehead like that. And then I read the emotions. I tell you the emotions I want you to let go of. For example, being dogmatic about this, like having made up your mind that that's what it is, and feeling sad about it, and grief and crying and all these things. And then by the end of that, you release everything, and then we retest. I can let go of the belief that love means being criticized. And now you are strong on that immediately. It doesn't take a week or a month or a year of saying the same affirmation, you don't have to do that. It literally takes seconds to get rid of a limiting belief like that, to start updating your love blueprint. And that is super powerful. And I think that's the missing link in a lot of things that are going on out there that are amazing. There's a lot of great stuff out there, but nobody's has that little niche there that I somehow fell upon because I needed it. Then I was able to start doing it with people, teaching it.
Well, you mentioned something very interesting in your book, which, by the way, everybody, go get a copy, Fit for Love. There's a new edition coming out, from what I understand, where you actually get into some of your new techniques a little bit more than the neuroemotional technique. But the book is great. It really talks about relationship building and really kind of honoring what we've talked about so far, whether it's relationships with your friends and family, or with your child, or with your romantic partner, whatever. But in the book, there was one little part that I read a couple times, because I was it actually spoke to me, because how many times have I had clients or patients come into my clinic and I simply don't have a way of offering them any help. It's a problem that took 20 years to develop, and I've got 7 minutes with you. Like, we're not going to get to the root of this issue. But even for a chiropractor, we've gone to chiropractors for years. They do the adjustment and then you walk away, presumably having been fixed. But you told the story around one chiropractor, I think it was Dr. Walker, if I recall, Scott Walker, who had said, okay, the adjustment was made. And then for whatever reason, they retested for the deficit and it was immediately back. It was like, well, why isn't it sticking? Why didn't the adjustment work? And then, of course, that leads us to ask, okay, what led to the dysfunction in the first place? And if we're not getting to that root, then the adjustment actually is less important. So maybe you can speak to the chiropractors as to how this has improved your practice as a chiropractor, because the adjustments, everybody knows, they see them all over Instagram, the neck cracking and the back cracking and the hip adjustments and all of that. But if we don't do these other steps, is chiropractics kind of falling short?
That's an interesting question. I mean, as a chiropractor, we have so many different techniques at our disposals. Not every chiropractor does an adjustment where you hear a noise in an audible.
It sounds like somebody breaking a cardboard box. Yeah.
There's so many different techniques. And personally, I think they all work. However, each person will find the kinds of techniques that will work best for them. And what Scott Walker discovered back then, that was back in 1986 or 87, was that he had a patient and he had adjusted her and it was better. But then when he was talking about the car accident that she was in that kind of led to that situation, all of a sudden, I don't know why, he decided to recheck and it was subluxated again. So he was like, wait a minute, like when I started talking about this, the stress, it's almost like she went back in the physiology of what happened to her in the accident and the body re-upped that same kind of subluxation. And so what he did then is he figured out a way of clearing the emotion using some acupuncture points. And then the adjustment was holding, quote, okay? And so now there's a whole other, that's a side note about this idea of adjustment holding, because for me, I don't look at it that way. The way I look at it is that every time somebody ends up with an issue of some type, pain somewhere, whatever, there's a reason for it. But people don't realize what this is necessarily. And the reasons could be either emotional, chemical, or structural. So for example, if I have a patient and they come in and I do a technique that's called total body modification, that's another, I do so many different techniques, but that's one of them. And in that particular technique, we can check circuits that have to do with the blood sugar. So if I test that and all their blood sugar circuits are off, and then I do the adjustment for that, and they all come back on, and then I tell them, if you go out and have a hot fudge sundae, those circuits will go off again. So don't tell me the adjustment is not holding. Every action you take, every piece of food you put in your mouth, every emotion you feel has an effect on your spine, because it has an effect on your organs and your meridians, which then affects the muscles, which affects the spine. Do you see? So there's always a reason why people have issues, right? It's like and I could go on and on with that. That's a whole other side note. On that.
Yeah, of course.
But the thing is, what you can do as a chiropractor is, I would suggest you take NET or MTT, one of those, so that you can learn a technique that's give you another tool to address the emotional aspect of things.
I see.
And then you can find out if there's an emotional component to a structural problem. And if you clear that, a lot of time you don't even need to do the adjustment, because as you clear the physiology through the meridian system of that event that caused the subluxation to begin with, then it just clears.
That makes a lot of sense. So in other words, we're not bashing chiropractors. I have more chiropractor friends than I do allopathic friends, believe it or not. Mm-hmm. But what you are saying is sometimes there's a physical adjustment that fixes the issue. Sometimes the physical adjustment won't stick unless there's some sort of emotion. If in the case that there's an emotional or mental underpinning that also needs to be addressed if this physical adjustment is going to make any difference. That's what you're saying.
Yes, and also chemically. If somebody's like not drinking enough water, they eat sugar, they drink too much caffeine or alcohol or drugs, or you know what I mean? You name it. The list goes on and on. It's an adjustment is a wonderful thing. I mean, that's what got me into chiropractic. I was in so much pain, and I went to a chiropractor after going to the medical doctor, right? And taking my blood pressure, my urine, my blood sample, and basically telling me I was perfectly healthy and that my pain was all in my head. And I'm like, my pain isn't up here. My pain is right here, and right here, you know. And then and I didn't used to have that. There must be a reason for it, but they had no clue.
Wow.
And a friend of mine told me about her chiropractor, and she said, you should go see him. And I said, okay. And back then, I mean, this was a long time ago. This is in 1981. And I had no idea what a chiropractor was. And I was in Quebec at the time, and in Quebec, there's even less chiropractors, especially back then. So I had no idea what they did. But if she told me he might be able to help me, I was like desperate at that point because I was in so much pain. And so I went to see him, and within 2 weeks, I was completely pain-free. He didn't do any emotional work, no chemical work. He only adjusted me, and it changed my life. And I have a lot of my patients that are like that too. I don't do emotional work on everybody, only to people that are interested or open to it, need it, you know? So it just depends what the problem is. If the problem is caused by a structural thing like me, I was doing a headstand and I fell out of it right on this area. That was a structural thing. You know, the only emotion was afterward, after I fell, right? It's like, why did I do that to myself, right? But other than that, it's structural, right? So that's why with his structural adjusting, and he was using an instrument, an activator. That's what he was using. So he never did any
like little gun, like
yeah, exactly. It's a little instrument. Like the way I use it is with an adjuster that's electric, right? So you push a little button, you get 13 impulses per second. That's what I like to use. But at the time, that didn't exist. So he just used an activator, which you have to press like this for each click. You know, so that's a lot of work. And I used that myself for many, many years until these instruments became available, and I discovered it, and then I switched to that because it's a lot easier. So
I don't want to get into the whole. Well, we've had a lot of benefit, but then there's other times where it's like, gosh, I thought that the chiropractic adjustment would help, and it did. I'll give you an example. Like my daughter, she's 2.5 now, and she's had like no other symptoms. Grow well, happy baby. Maybe there's a little bit of agitation here and there, but it's associated with loose stools. And the chiropractor, you know, tried to do some things and it just didn't seem to work. And then as we've tried almost everything that my toolbox has offered, we also found another one of Jason Picard's therapists, Rudy Verspor, and he was like, you know, it's interesting. You've tried everything. She's lived a perfect life. She had a perfect birth. Maybe there's like an inherited trauma, or excuse me, maybe there's something emotional underlying this that isn't hers to be carrying, but she's burdened with it. And so we're trying some homeopathics in alignment in conjunction with chiropractics. And I think we're getting somewhere now, but I guess this is why having done this for 40 years, there's a right tool for the right person in the right circumstances. And so we'll get into maybe a little bit more of the MTT, but you mentioned like things like healthy diet and all of that. That to me is like common knowledge. But I was surprised to read in your book about the importance of hydration, because I've been pushing people on this, for a long time, ever since really I met Paul Chek, and he gave me a lot of resources to think about this differently. But why does hydration matter for how your spine is functioning? Let's just go in this direction for a minute, and then we'll come back to what you do with MTT.
Okay. Well, for one thing, for one thing, the kidney meridian and the bladder meridians, right, are ruling water in the body. And so there are specific muscles that relate to that. For example, the psoas muscle.
Here
The
we go.
psoas muscle is it's a very important muscle, right? That is supporting your low back and your hips and your pelvis and everything. And if you don't drink enough water, that muscle either will get weak on one side or will get super tight. And now it's going to affect your low back. Now you're going to have low back pain because you didn't drink enough water. Do you see? Another way that I see it often is like, especially with athletes, especially young athletes, like teenagers and stuff like that, everybody tells them to drink water, but they don't. And they end up twisting their ankle because the bladder meridian rules all the ankle muscles and the feet. So if they don't drink enough water, it trips the circuit. And now these muscles aren't working right. So when I test them, they're weak. They're not able to hold them. But yet they're playing soccer, right? So the next thing you know, they twist an ankle because that muscle isn't working anymore because they tripped the circuit. The way I explain it to my patients is that each muscle is on a circuit, just like you have in your electric box, right? You have a circuit for your laundry, you have a circuit for your bathroom, you have a circuit for the kitchen, a circuit for the bedroom, etc., right? So in the body, we have circuits for everything. So we have circuits for the bladder, we have circuits for the stomach, we have circuits for the lungs, circuits for the adrenals, the blood sugar, etc. And so if you put too much on a circuit, what happens? The breaker goes off.
Well, you blow the breaker, yeah.
Exactly. So what happens in the body? If you keep not drinking enough water, it will blow that circuit. So the muscles that are on that circuit will go weak. And now you don't have that part of your body supporting you the way you're used to. But you don't know that happens. So you keep demanding of your body what you normally could do, like a soccer player, for example. But now that circuit was off. Now their ankle muscles are not working. They're inhibited. And they twist their ankle. Do you see?
Yeah. Yeah.
So that's just one example. But each organ has a specific things that will trip the circuit. So like with the pancreas, if you eat too much sugar or white flour products, it's going to trip the pancreas circuit. So now your latissimus dorsi and your lower trapezius and your upper traps and mid traps are going to go weak. When that happens, your shoulders will go up and forward. And now you have, super tight upper traps. And you have that forward posture like this, like so many teenagers have and older people have. And that's a lifetime of eating sugar and white flour, white bread, white pasta, whatever. And that trips those circuits and people don't know that's what it is. And so their muscles are not holding them properly. And they also have chronic tension in their upper traps, right? So that's just another example. And we could do a whole other call on that. I'd be happy to do that. That's
fascinating. Yeah, it's fascinating. Yeah, I mean, we could go through all of these different circuits, one by one for people to even get a little glimpse into maybe what's going on under the surface that isn't necessarily just going to be shown by blood work. I'm trying to get people past this blood work thing. Like there's far more to the human condition than blood work.
Absolutely. And actually, I've been writing another book, but for years now, because I don't have time to focus on it. It's called Your Body's Owner's Manual. And in that, I explain all of those things, but I haven't had time to finish it. But I've been working on that for decades.
You've been busy, and in your book Fit for Love, one of the things that has kept you busy is this vanishing twin syndrome that you had referred to in the past. So for those who don't know, excuse me, when you get pregnant and have a baby, it's possible that there were two eggs that were there were two conceptions inside of there, two embryos formed, and one of those embryos maybe, quote, didn't make it, for lack of better terms, and the other one grew to be a baby that emerged out of the vagina, and that's your little boy or little girl. But this concept of vanishing twin syndrome is rather compelling, especially when we look at it a little bit more metaphysically, as though in the way that you have. So tell me about why this became like this came onto your radar and why it's so important for the work that you do.
Yes. Well, the first thing is I have to give credit to Dr. Scott Walker again. The guy's a genius. I love Scott Walker. And I started taking his work literally like in probably 1990, something like that, so a long time ago. And he, at the time, had been working with NET that he developed and everything. And I don't remember exactly when he discovered that, but he was working with a client and it came up that whatever happened to that person that was significant for what he was clearing was in the womb. So then he tested to see if it had to do with the mom, and it was no, and the dad, no, and the siblings, and it said yes. So then he named all the siblings that were already born, and it was no, no, no. So he's like at a loss. He said, well, a vanishing twin. And then it showed up that that's what it was. So that's how he discovered this. And then he shared it with all of us, all the NAT practitioners. And then we started to find it in our patients, but only once in a great while, like when we would index for time and it would go back to the womb, and then somehow it showed up there was a vanishing twin. And when somebody was working on me, it showed up that I had 2 vanishing twins. And that explained a lot about myself, about my life and everything, including the profession I chose and everything. It's amazing. In the book, I explained a lot of that. I have a whole section on the vanishing twin. And so anyway, once he discovered that, find it, like, I don't remember how many years later, but X amount of years later, 5-10 years later, the medical profession started doing ultrasound on pretty much every pregnant woman, whether they needed it or not, in their first trimester. And they started to find that 1 out of 8 women was conceiving more than 1 embryo at first. That was like, wow, right? But only 1 out of 70 women actually give birth to a live set of twins. That's a lot of dead twins.
Yeah.
And so I happened to develop a technique to figure out on purpose if somebody had a vanishing twin. And then, because I worked with so many people, thousands of people who had vanishing twins, then I noticed there was a pattern, like the same kinds of beliefs, the same kinds of blueprints kept showing up over and over and over again amongst them. And so in the book, I described 17 different categories of beliefs that I found kept happening over and over. And there was some of them that were pretty much universal. And the first one was that love means being abandoned, because that was our first experience. And some of our listeners there, as I'm saying that, may be getting chills like I am right now. Because if it happened to you, your subconscious remembers. And as I'm saying this, you're reacting to it. It's called a parasympathetic response, right? Because your nervous system knows that happened to you, and that's why you're feeling it right now. Like I'm feeling it myself. I'm still having goosebumps. But the point is that because we were abandoned by our twin or twins in the very beginning, we believe that's what love is. So then guess what? We keep reproducing the abandonment. So for me, I was abandoned by my twins first. So that's 2 people, right? And then when my mom had to go give birth to my sister because she was premature, like her water broke when she was like 8 months pregnant, and she was a nurse. So she knew she had to get to the hospital, and they were in Ottawa and they had to drive all the way to Quebec City area. And so they had already made a plan that if they needed to go, they would drop me off at my aunt that was kind of like in the middle of that trajectory, and then leave me there and go give birth, right? But I was 1.5 years old. And this is way back when people didn't think you needed to explain to a 1.5 years old child what was going on and what was going to happen or anything, right? And they didn't come back for a month, because my sister had to be in an incubator. So do you think I was excited when I saw them come back and with a new baby girl? No.
Not at all.
There I was angry. And you know, and I had a huge sibling rivalry going on with my sister for many years because of that. So I felt abandoned by both of them right then and there. And then when I was 2, my dad had a nervous breakdown and he had to be hospitalized because this is in the years way before lithium or any help of any kind for people that had nervous breakdown. So he had to be hospitalized. So I felt abandoned by my dad again. And then because of that, my mother had to put us in a foster home because she had to go back to work. So I felt abandoned by my mom again. Do you see? And it just went on like that, these abandonment in my life, all the way up to my ex-husband, right? Who has managed to abandon me after 20 years.
Bingo.
Do you see? And then I figured all this stuff out. And I cleared it. And I haven't had anybody abandon me since then. Doesn't mean people are not going to start dying at some point, but that's normal. You know, it's just,
Right.
But do you see what I'm saying? It took me that long to figure that out. And then I finally did. And I've been clearing so many people off of that. So that people who keep getting abandoned over and over again, it's coming from the vanishing twins so many times.
Yeah.
And I was thinking your daughter, we might want to check her for that because
we should. Yeah.
large intestine has to do with grief and sadness. And so if she had a twin, she might feel all this grief and sadness, and it's affecting her large intestine.
Let's do it. We're going to book this up next week. I would love that. Let's check it out. Man.
You know what I mean?
Poor little
It's
girl.
like, yeah, it's a possibility. I'm just saying it's a possibility. I've seen things like
that. She's 2.5, so she's not very good at following directions. So how do you test for these things on a little baby?
Very good question. I use a surrogate. So you'll be the surrogate, or the mother can be the surrogate. Okay.
Oh, I love being the surrogate.
Yes. As a matter of fact, speaking of vanishing twin, oh my God, we could do a whole call just on the vanishing twin, but I'll give you this nutshell here. When I was pregnant, I knew I had twins in there at first. I was dreaming about twins. I was seeing twins everywhere. I was drawing twins. I was buying 2 of everything. You know, I just knew I had twins in there. And then at the beginning of the 4th month, the end of the 3rd, I started spotting. And I felt this intense grief. And I just knew at that moment that I was either losing one of my babies or both of my babies. And I was 40 when I was pregnant.
Wow.
And so I was like devastated, right? And then, so I did all this work on myself, you know, with NET at the time, because that's what I was really using at the time. And I cleared all the grief and everything. And a week later, I stopped spotting and I was still pregnant. So I knew that I lost a twin. And I knew I was going to have to deal with that with my son. So I didn't know it was a son at the time. I just knew I had another baby in there that was still alive, right? So when he was born, first of all, he was like a little Buddha when he came out. I had a water birth and he came out and he was just like, he literally practically smiled. It was wild. No crying, nothing. He was just so calm. He was just looking at me and Dad because we were both in the tub. You know, he was holding me in the tub. And so while I was delivering the baby and the midwife was there and everything. And he wasn't interested in nursing at all.
Wow.
For like 36 hours, he wouldn't nurse. He was completely content, just sleeping and looking at us and looking at his environment and everything. So finally, the midwife came back after 36 hours and we told her he hasn't nursed yet. She says, so why don't you just try it now? So I put him on the left breast and he starts nursing. I'm like, okay, he's showing up for the midwife, you know?
Yeah.
And my husband was relieved because he was really worried, like, what's wrong with this baby? He doesn't want to nurse, right? But anyway, so he nursed, and then I put him on the right breast, And he didn't latch. Wasn't interested. Like he had enough of just the left. I said, okay. So then the next morning I'm on the right because my right breast is like, full of milk compared to the left one, right? And he wouldn't do it. So then I tried on the left and he nursed immediately. That went on for 5 days. I had to call the La Leche League women to come and help me. And they brought a pump and they taught me how to pump so that I could get the milk and then put it in a little syringe and give it to him and all that. And finally, after 5 days, it dawned on me, he was saving the right side for the twin.
Oh, like my little brother was going to use that breast, that type of thing.
Exactly. It's like twins know which side is theirs.
That is so interesting.
It's based on demand, right? So the more you take milk, the more milk you make, right? The less you take, the less it makes. So anyway, that's what I discovered. And so I used my husband as a surrogate, and I checked my son, letting go of the belief that he had to save the right breast for his sibling, right? For his twin. We cleared that. 5 minutes later, he was nursing on the right side. Never had another problem.
Wow.
And I'm sure that some of the women listening to me right now know what I'm talking about. Except they didn't have a tool like I had to figure it out and clear it so that they finally are okay with nursing.
Yeah. Okay, so then if that person were to come to your office, you could clear that, and then they're able to breastfeed as they would otherwise, just after the clearing.
At least that's my experience, and I've done it with a few other people after that.
Tell me a little bit about, I'm going to ask just a couple other questions related to my practice, which really is the preconception fertility part, all the way up through postpartum, but also in the middle, a lot of women are experiencing miscarriages and grieving, traumatic births, like healthy mom, healthy baby, but the birth itself was super traumatic. Or a baby dies in the uterus in the 3rd trimester, some really horrific things. So maybe you can talk about, like, what are some of the stories that people tell themselves around fertility? And have you had any experience working with clearing some of those beliefs? And then a person goes on to either maybe not pursue pregnancy at all, or they maybe go on to get pregnant. Do you have any cases that like that have come up?
Absolutely. Several. Like probably at least
a lot.
a few hundreds of women over the years.
Just a couple.
I mean, when you've been doing this for 40 years, right? You've seen everything multiple times, right? But it's a pretty common problem nowadays that women can't conceive, right? There's a lot of that. Or they have issues during the pregnancy. Or, like you said, they have a miscarriage. Or et cetera, right? Like all these different scenarios. So I can help people with any of those scenarios. So I've helped women that were unable to conceive, be able to conceive. First of all, by changing the belief system, because a lot of time that has to do with fear of like what it's going to be like to give birth, right? Fear of becoming a mother, etc. Fear of dying giving birth. There's so many different possibilities, in there. And so I can help women get rid of all of that stuff and then make them congruent with being okay with getting pregnant, being okay with carrying out a whole pregnancy with a healthy baby, being okay with giving birth, being okay with having a live child, being okay becoming a mother. You see, all these different things. But also because I am a chiropractor and I've learned so many different techniques in the total body modification technique, there's a whole technique for fertility. And I've used that on a number of women, and usually they get pregnant very quickly after that. So one of them was one of my secretaries. Her name was Lisa, and she had been trying to get pregnant for like 5 years. She was married and they really wanted to have a child, and they tried for 5 years and nothing happened. So she told me, I said, oh, really? I said, are you sure you want to have a child? She says, yeah. I said, okay. So I did the technique. I cleared the circuits that needed to be cleared for that. And at the time, I didn't even do any emotional work on her because she really wanted to have a child. It was, they really wanted to. Didn't even do that, just did the physical part. A month later, she was pregnant. So then she had her child. And 5 years later, or maybe 10 years later, it's quite a difference between the two kids. I can't remember. They were trying again. They wanted to have a second kid, and it wasn't happening again. So she came to me. She said, "Hey, we really want to have a second kid, but we've been trying. It's not working." So, "You sure you want a second kid?" She says, "Yep." Okay. So I did the technique, cleared those circuits again. A month later, she was pregnant. So those two kids are thanks to me. But that's just one example. I've done it with women. Yeah, it's like a very powerful technique. But nowadays it still helps, but there's so many factors. You have to look at their diet also. If they're really acidic, it's not.
Of course.
It's not. It doesn't promote the fetus to be able to grow. You have to be more alkaline. You have to be clean. And have to make sure these circuits are working, and that emotionally you're willing. And then also sometimes it's on the man's side. So the sperm count is going down like dramatically in the last many years. So you have to check the father as well, and do whatever is necessary for him to be able to be better as well.
Yeah.
So to be more alkaline and, all of that.
Well, the reason I even bring this up around the fertility piece specifically is a lot of people, they've invest a lot of money into this fertility journey. And maybe they ultimately find themselves with IVF or whatever, and they still can't get pregnant. And yet their labs, their biomarkers, their diet, everything is as clean as can be, and they're still not able to. Mm-hmm. And it has occurred to me, like I've said, that like I get like the hardest cases, like the people who have been to everybody come to me, and then I do my very best. But sometimes there's still something that's limiting this, and I can feel it. Like I have a gut feeling that maybe you don't really want to have kids, mister. It's usually the guy, or it could be the woman. But I don't say that to them. I just have this gut feeling like, I'm not sure you really want this, but you guys are telling one another, we really want to do this. And yet I sense something is amiss there. And sometimes you start to unpack that and you do have a lot of apprehension. The issue is that I don't have a way of fixing that, but you do.
Exactly.
In working on these limiting beliefs.
If you take the training, then you will be able to do that yourself.
I'm going to. Yes. I will. I promise.
I know you're busy, but the thing is, yes, you can easily clear all of that stuff. You can clear all the limiting beliefs around it, and the fears and the stress about it, and everything that goes along with it. You have to be a little bit of a detective, to figure it out. Like you have to look, okay, what was it like when they were a child? Was it traumatic?
Yeah.
Was it stressful and all that? And clear all the stress they had in that, and then clear all the stress they have in their relationship. Because sometimes people, especially nowadays, divorce rate is so high, sometimes people are afraid that if they have a kid, it's going to split them up, and then they're going to have to deal with that on top of their relationship and money and house and whatever else, right?
Yeah.
So there's so many different aspects to this. You just have to be a little bit of a detective and just explore all that and clear whatever's in there.
Yeah, absolutely. Let me give you another scenario, as we're wrapping up here. There's a lot of women who are experiencing some form of trauma. And I know that word has become, it's all over the place now, but a lot of women feel, let's just say, dissatisfied or sometimes even a little bit resentful to the care providers who help them with their birth. This could be them beating themselves up because they had another miscarriage and they feel like it was that glass of wine or whatever, something they did. They traveled while they were in their first trimester and they had a miscarriage. Like they do the self-blame thing, but then they also sometimes go through either the hospital system or even at home and they have some sort of resentment about how that experience went. And they feel like this person maybe didn't treat them right or speak to them right. And they hold on to that so much so that I actually think it impacts their health later. So can you give an example of some experience that somebody had around grief and how you've kind of started through your detective work to unpack that and help them clear that?
Absolutely. So it's like there's have a protocol for that too, where you can just get rid of any kind of strong emotion, whether it's grief or anger or, worry or anxiety or depression. It doesn't matter what it is. There's always a reason behind it, and it's always affecting the meridian system. And when you clear that, it will help the body heal whatever is going on. So absolutely, I've done this with thousands of people, getting rid of grief about any kind of thing, losing their husband, losing their mother, their daughter, their father, their baby, their miscarriage baby. I mean, and also their vanishing twin. That I've done that with thousands of people. People feel really sad to this day of having lost their twin, because the bond between twins is stronger than the bond between mother and child. That's a very strong bond. Think about the mama bear thing, right? Like the bond between mother and child is very strong, but the twin bond is even stronger. So when you lose your twin, it's a big deal. And there's a lot of grief, and that grief is not expressed consciously because you don't remember, right? So that's one of the categories that I have in my book for the vanishing twin syndrome survivors, is people who are depressed, and there's no obvious reason for them to be depressed. They've been depressed since they were kids, and even though they grew up in a family that's loving and normal, and there's no abuse or anything like that, but they feel depressed and they can't shake it off. Almost all these people had vanishing twins. And so they feel depressed to this day that they lost their twins, right? And once they finally figure that out, and we can get rid of that and all the stress of all the different meridians on that, because it affects everything, it's a game changer.
There's so many applications for what it is that you're talking about. And I feel so fortunate to have found you. Jason was pretty persistent, and I was like, yeah, the baby's here. Let me go and just have an evening where I spend some time with somebody interesting. And interesting indeed. I'm planning to do all of your training. I'm in the middle of anthroposophic medicine and homeopathy right now, but this is another really, really powerful tool that I think any of us, even if you're not like a full-blown accredited healthcare practitioner, maybe just taking the training would give you some insights into how, why it is that you're experiencing this world in the way that you are, for better or for worse. So, Dr. Teshna, what would you recommend for people who right now are like, I want to go and check out this training? What's the steps?
Well, what I would suggest is just go on my website, and on that I have a tab that says trainings. And you click on that and you'll see all the different things that I offer. And I would suggest you start with the free forgiveness call that I do every Sunday, except the 4 Sundays a year that I teach the 3-day training. I basically lead people through a process to forgive someone of your choosing on all levels. Because forgiveness, as we know, is very difficult to achieve when you're just coming from your mind. Because even though you want to forgive them, you still feel it in your body. And you still feel the grudge, you still feel the anger, and you still feel the hurt. But when you go through the process that I do, and it's free, anybody can join. And I lead the whole group. Sometimes I have 40 people in there, 20 people, whatever it is. And I lead people through this, and everybody gets to that, pretty much to that 0 point where they just feel completely fine with that person. And so I do that every Sunday. I would start with that. Then you get a feel for what it does. And then if you like that, then I also offer a 1-day MTT immersion that's actually free, unless you do the VIP version, so you can get the workbook and the recording and an extra hour with me as a group to answer questions and clear things. And then I also have the 3-day training that I do. And I also have a membership now that I started less than a year ago, because my students love what I have so much. They said, well, we want more, So I said, okay, let's figure this out. So I created a membership. And in that membership, people can take all my trainings. As long as they're a member, they can keep taking all the trainings over and over again. And we meet every week for an hour, and I lead them through a group coaching, so that I coach them how to do it. I have them do it, lead the group, or I also lead through sessions. And we clear stuff about their love blueprint, their money blueprint, their health blueprint, you name it, all these different things. Clearing fears and stress and phobias and the whole 9 yards. It's a lot of fun.
So if people wanted to do your membership, they basically get Dr. Teshna, like the VIP unlimited package, basically, right? They get to work with you in any which way, learn everything. Okay, that's what I have to sign up for. Absolutely.
Yeah. So, yeah, that's the idea.
So for people who just want to get their whistle wet, we've got the Sunday forgiveness calls. I just registered. That's how easy it was. I did it with one hand. I just registered for your call on the 28th of April. Well, at this time.
Yeah, because this weekend I'm teaching the 3-day training. That's why I'm not doing it this Sunday.
Oh, amazing. Well, that'll be the next step. We'll do the 1 day, the 3-day, and then I'll be your star student. And hopefully we can get some other people to go over and check this out. This does seem to be kind of a missing link for a lot of us, whether or not you're in healthcare. It seems like this is kind of a basic people skill that maybe we could all develop for ourselves. So, Dr. Teshna, thank you for giving me some of your time. You're in Costa Rica. Is that right? Did I hear that right?
No, I'm in Ecuador.
Oh, in Ecuador. Excuse me, Ecuador. Well, enjoy your time down there and eat some fresh fruit for me. Get some sunshine. We all know that that's another important part of being optimally healthy. Get some sunshine, and I will talk to you soon. I'll see you on the 28th for the forgiveness call.
Good. Thank you for having me on your call. I really appreciate it. It's fun.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun for me too. We'll see you soon. We'll bring you into the Born Free community as well to do a special presentation for them. I think they're going to love you as well.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right. Bye, Dr. Teshna.